All right, here we go. We're going to talk about differentiation in our lessons. And to be fair, this is probably one of the harder concepts in the lesson plan to get our heads around. And so we're going to scaffold this for you. We're going to start with some ideas this year, and then we're going to add some more ideas once you've had your practicum under your belt for your next semester and next year. But to be fair, differentiation, it's a tricky concept. So if you're feeling confused or frustrated, that's okay. What I want it to do is help you kind of at least start down the right path so that you don't stay at that frustrated and confused state. Okay, so this is Brandon from the fourth year cohort. This was this was his quote from last year when we were talking about differentiation. His quote was, "It currently still feels like a make-work project for the excelling and a charity case for the developing group." That's what his differentiation when he was doing his lessons felt like. So let's see what we can do to help you not. Oh, that's not very nice. Oh, I know why, because I have it there. That's at least a little prettier. Okay, so one of, I think, the absolute best resources that I have found on differentiation is actually an Alberta education source called Making a Difference, Meeting Diverse Learning Needs with a Differentiated Instruction. It is really explicit, gives lots of examples, and actually explains differentiation in really understandable terms. So again, this needs to be on your e-portfolio. This is one of your readings for lesson 6, but I would slip it into lesson 5 if you can. If you're done your reading from last week, I would definitely have a look at this, and I'll tell you specific page numbers. But it is an excellent resource for you to keep by your side as you're teaching. Okay, let's talk about the key elements of differentiated instruction. So the very nature of differentiated instruction means that it will look different in different learning contexts and environments, depending on the students, the teacher, and or the curriculum. Again, I should have put my Holy Grail picture here. There is no Holy Grail to how to differentiate. Darn. Okay. In all contexts, however, effective differentiated instruction involves knowing your students, understanding the curriculum, providing multiple pathways to learning, sharing responsibility with students, and taking a flexible and reflective approach. Okay, so I want to look specifically at that providing multiple pathways to learning, because I think that's what you need right now as you're starting to lesson plan. Okay, so multiple pathways to learning, excuse me, differentiate. What you want to do is, the question is, if this is where I have to take my students, how do I most effectively get them there? So these are your sort of 4 areas that you can think about when you're four, not 5, 4. When you're thinking about differentiation. So around content, around process, around products, and around learning environment. So actually, let's have a peek at those. Again, one of my favorite sites, Reading Rockets. What is differentiated instruction? Okay, so here it is. Content, process, products, learning environment. So basically, examples of differentiated content at the elementary level include the following: using reading materials at varying readability levels. So I was alluding to that in the Orca book series and the struggling reading lecture. So, use some of those different levels of readers. Put text materials on tape. Tape, isn't that cute? You have lots of books that are recorded online, so use those. Use spelling or vocab lists at readiness levels of students. It's okay to have different spelling lists for different students, and we're going to talk about how does that work. We're going to talk about that. Presenting ideas through both auditory and visual means. So again, thinking about auditory, visual. Use reading buddies and meeting, again, with small groups to reteach an idea or skill for struggling learners or to extend the thinking or skills for advanced. Okay, so that's content. the actual content stuff that you're looking at. Process. Examples of differentiating process or activities at elementary level include using tiered activities through which all learners work with the same important understandings and skills, but proceed with different levels of support, challenge, or complexity. Okay, so you have the same kind of overall lesson, but it's tiered. And what you might, I've heard some teachers say, they maybe have 6 levels in an activity, and they'll say to student A, you need to get to level 2, and they'll say to student B, you need to get to level 6. And kids want to be treated fairly and consistently, but they also know pretty much where everybody's at cognitively. And unless you have a really strange community vibe in your classroom, the kids really are okay with the struggling kids getting different material, and the excelling kids are really pretty happy to get more challenging material because they're bored out of their minds. So, and you're probably like, well, then that's not fair and consistent, but you have to treat the kids fairly and consistently. But from a content pedagogy point of view, you actually have to differentiate so that you're meeting the needs of every child. Does that make sense? See, this is kind of a crazy concept in here. Okay, again, we're going to go on to process. Provide interesting centers that encourage students to explore subsets of the class topic of particular interest to them. So then they, again, if they can super engage at a high level, or they need to be here for this particular concept, these centers give that flexibility. Develop personal agendas. Again, one student needs to get from A to B, and then the other student, you would expect them to get from A to M in there. Offer manipulatives or hands-on supports for students who need them. I know in math class you are doing lots of manipulatives, and how can you, how those kids that actually need that hands-on, they need to actually see what a 10 block is. They can't abstractly visualize it. Do it, give it to them. And vary the length of time a student may take. So again, some kids can actually do work pretty quickly and others just need more time. So that's the process. That's the actual sort of process of teaching that you can alter. The products, so what the actual products that they produce you can also differentiate. So give students option of how to express required learning, so they can create a puppet show, they can write a letter, they develop a mural. So I gave you, so for example, in your assignment, can't remember which one, I gave you the option to do an infographic or write an academic paper. So then you can sort of go, oh, I love infographics. Give me Canva and let me go kind of thing. And so that's differentiating the product. You can use rubrics that match and extend students' varied skill levels. You can allow students to work alone or in small groups. Again, for those social kids who love being in groups, maybe they do their best work in a group. And encourage students to create their own product assignments as long as the assignments contain required elements. So does every child have to produce the exact same thing? Again, that's where you can differentiate the product. And finally, the learning environment. You can differentiate the learning environment. So make sure there are places in the room to work quietly without distractions. So for those kids who actually get overwhelmed or don't do well with chaos, maybe there's a spot for them that they can go to, or they can go out in the hallway as long as they tell you, like those kind of things. So that's the actual learning environment. Provide materials that reflect a variety of cultures and home settings. Again, we want those kids to see themselves. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in our inclusivity lesson. They want to be able to see themselves in the text and in the work. Set out clear guidelines for independent work that matches individual needs. If you know that child will absolutely not be able to work independently on their own, then you just set that child right beside you. right? And so that's the learning environment. Develop routines that allow students to help when teachers are busy with other students. So you can set up sort of a peer mentoring kind of thing, and help students understand that some learners need to move around to learn while others do better sitting quietly. Kids, again, they're super intuitive and they know what's going on in the classroom. So if you've got a child in there who needs one of those, exercise balls, and they're, rocking back and forth, the other kids are just like, okay, whatever. But you have to set that up. You have to set that up properly. Okay, so those are the 4 ways that you can differentiate sort of overall: the learning environment, the actual product, the process or your pedagogical choices, and then the actual content. The actual content in there. Okay, so all that, yeah, that's it. If this is what I'm supposed to do to differentiate, if this is what I'm supposed to differentiate, how do I do it? Okay, so to bring it down into that lesson plan that we're wanting you to differentiate your activities, you need to use the Alberta Program of Studies to write your outcomes with a range of Bloom's verbs and be specific. Again, be specific in how you will know students are reaching the outcome. If you are not specific, if you say students will understand or students will comprehend, you're hooped. It's going to be really hard to differentiate. However, if you say students will list 4 vocabulary words, then you got something that you can differentiate. So maybe your excelling students, you say, actually, my excelling students are actually going to define, or they're going to classify the 4 vocabulary words. Whereas my beginning students are going to list. So the more specific you can be in that, how will I know the students have achieved the learning outcomes, the easier it will be to differentiate in there. Think about what will help each student learn these outcomes. So choose overall instruction to promote maximum student achievement in all students. We're going to talk about that. So you want to think about tools for beginning or developing students. You want to think about those tools. What can you actually give them? And then ultimately, how can you enrich or extend a particular activity? Okay, so let's have a look at what does this look like in your differentiation section of your lesson plan. So hopefully by the little sad face here, these are things that you don't want to see. These will make, if I see these on your lesson plans, they might make me a little sad, like our little guy here. So beginning or developing, partner up with an excelling student or an EA. Now, there are times, absolutely, like I'm going to allude back to what my sister said about, get that struggling reader to work with an excelling reader. Absolutely. There are times when that is super effective as a differentiation tool. However, if that's all you're ever doing, then it's not cool. Right? So for those beginning kids, they need more than just, go work with Joey because Joey understands everything, right? So, or for beginning and developing, just simply writing fewer sentences or fewer words, right? So you want to make sure that they're not just doing less. And that's where Brandon's quote was, I feel like the beginning is just a charity case. It's just like, yeah, do whatever, like just do one thing kind of thing. And that's not what we want. Excelling and enriching, again, work with the beginning student unless it's actually the perfect match. We don't want them to just do another worksheet or paragraph at the same level that the kid already understands, right? I remember when my girls were at home and they would bring math sheets home, and there'd be 25 questions of math, all at basically the same level. And my girls, after like 6 questions, they'd be like, I understand the concept. And so I would sign it off and say, Alita understands these math concepts. I don't feel that she has to do the other ones. I was a pretty good parent most of the time, but those math sheets drove me nuts. So again, don't get them to just do more at the same level. They already understand. Share more, or just share more with the class during class discussion, like just let them talk more. Color or illustrate, that's one of my favorites. It's not really extending their understanding, it's just busy work. Don't let them just catch up on homework, or just don't have them write extra sentences with more words. Okay, so those are some things that you don't want to have over and over again as your differentiation, because it's not really differentiating. It's just giving some kids less stuff to do and some kids more stuff to do, which is actually not differentiation. Okay, let's now jump into what does this actually look like. See how it's a little bit crazy. So extending enriching, let's look at what this could actually look like. So if you can think about that, you need to create your learning opportunities to be abstract, complex, and interrelated right from the start, then it doesn't become a more situation. So let me explain. So if you can make your learning opportunity more abstract, where the content focuses less on specific factual information and more on concepts and generalizations, there's more room for those kids who need more enrichment, for them to find it. Okay, so if you can make your learning opportunities more abstract versus just list this, say this, spell this, where if it's more abstract, like I want you to compare these concepts, there's way more room for those kids who need extension to actually extend without it just becoming a more situation. Complex. The original content remains, but is compared, contrasted, or combined with other information or concepts. For example, a basic learning activity of surveying the class to find out how many students come to school by walking, biking, busing, or car could be then made more complex by asking your kids who need extension to compare distance from school with various modes of transportation. So the whole activity of doing a survey could be a class activity, but it can naturally be differentiated. So those kids who are working at a lower cognitive level can do all the, okay, there's this many bikes and there's this many people who walk and those kind of things. Whereas your kids who need that extension can then go, does the actual mode of transportation depend on how far they're coming from school, which is an extension of your learning objective. It's all kind of crazy. Okay, and interrelated. Students who are gifted often spot the potential for applying ideas or methods from one field of study to another. So if you can build on this ability by looking for potential connections from one subject to the next, then the kids who need more challenge can actually use their knowledge and their understanding. So for example, students can actually take a knowledge of weather and climate from a science curriculum and use it in a social studies curriculum about how people could potentially adapt to their environment based on the weather and climate. So again, you can, so for those kids who don't need the extension, who are your beginning or your sort of middle kids, is that they can stay in that, just look at weather and climate. But for those extended kids, they can delve into how do people adapt. It's hard. This is a hard concept, but I think the more that you think about how can you create learning opportunities that already have all of these aspects in them, then it's easier to differentiate. So differentiate instruction for students who are gifted means enhanced opportunities for thinking and learning, not just more work to do. So this is page 180 of that amazing document that I gave you. Okay, let's go on into extending and enriching. So this kind of what is this? What are these potential lesson opportunities, activities that I'm talking about? So again, this needs to be planned ahead by you. This isn't just something that you just do in class, because what's going to happen is if you just do that in class, then you're just going to end up giving the kid, here's another worksheet, do another worksheet, or go finish your homework, or go read a book. I mean, reading a book is always a good option, but shouldn't be your go-to differentiation. Okay, so you can do, here are some actual ways that you can incorporate this into your lesson plan. So have tiered assignments. So I'm just going to read this. This is from page 182 of this document. Tiered assignments are parallel tasks that have varied levels of complexity, depth, abstractness, and support. Students in the class all focus on the same learning outcome, but work on different levels of activities related to the outcome. These types of assignments allow students who are gifted to work at a more challenging level. Tasks from one tier to the next should differ in level of complexity, not simply be more or less work. So you're actually tiering. So at tier 1, they're working at the recall level of Bloom's. At tier 6, they're working at the analysis or the creation level of Bloom's. So that's what I mean by tiered assignments. Questions. You could ask more open-ended questions where the students who really need that opportunity to go to a different level have the opportunity, versus just asking all recall kind of questions like, what color is the red wagon? For those enriching kids, they're just like, it's red, right? And so you want to have more open-ended questions. Have some independent projects where all students do an independent project, but you have different expectations of different groups or different students. Again, they buy in. Fair and consistent you need to be in how you treat them, but they understand that Joey needs to do more because he's just way smart, right? Like they understand that. Cluster groups of other children at the same level. Every so often you want to let those gifted or your top students be in a group together and just like go at her kind of thing. But not all the time, right? Because then it becomes really cliquey and elitist, and that's not what you want. Increase access to diverse materials and resources. So again, if they start to do a research project, those kids who can handle it, you start to give them different websites and you start to give them different materials at a different reading level so that they're challenged, and maybe at a more abstract level. And allow them to do some self-assessment, because again, those kids who are at the upper level, sometimes they just slough off and they don't actually really engage. And so you want to make sure that they know that you expect the best work from them all the time. So this is kind of a bit of an example. So tier 1 is describe an ant community in pictures or words. So that would be like your tier 1. Your tier 2, which is going up the Bloom's, would be describe an ant community using at least 3 sentences with at least 3 describing words in each sentence. So it's kind of like, well, isn't it just more? Isn't that what you said we weren't supposed to do? But what this is doing is it's just moving them up. It's just moving them into thinking about the content in a different way. But the thing is, the trick here is, where it's not more is because you don't make all the students do tier 1. You give some students tier 1 and then you give some students tier 2. So the kids who already can describe an ant community in pictures or words, who want to do more right off the top, don't have to do this and then this. They just do this. That's where it doesn't become the more. It becomes what you're expecting of them. And differentiation instruction for students who are gifted means enhanced opportunities for thinking and learning, not just more work to do. Oh, there it is again. There's that same quote again. Okay, let's talk about beginning now. Again, how can you create the learning opportunity to be cognitively appropriate right from the start, so it does not just become a charity case situation? So these are some ways that you can think about your learning opportunities, setting them up right from the get-go, to be able to be successful for your beginning learners all the way through to your high level learners. So again, you can do that small group or one-on-one time. Sometimes you need to you need to pull some of those beginning students. So try to find that small group time, that one-on-one time. That's when the guided reading comes in nicely. And this is one of your best times to differentiate, when you're one-on-one, because you can laser focus in on exactly what that child needs. And this means that maybe you set up some independent work for the rest of the class, and then you pull those beginning students one-on-one as they need. Flexible grouping, again, this is sometimes their groups based on interests or knowledge, and then other times you just need to pull some of your beginning students all together. But again, be careful that you're not always putting all your beginning students together all the time. So it's that flexible grouping so they can actually really learn from each other as well. Independent learning activities, again, this will allow, if you give them some independence in their learning activities, then they will have more time to develop their ideas, which usually your beginning students just need more time, or they just need to hear it like 17 times, whereas your high level only need to hear it twice. So if you have some independent learning activities, those beginning students can take their time, and you can help reiterate those concepts over and over. Not everybody has to work at this exact same pace. Okay. Use technology. Again, there are lots of sites where books can be read, like they can listen to books. They can translate for ELL students. There are educational sites with pop-ups on the side to give more explanation. You could send them home with a website where there's a recording, or you can make a recording so that they can listen to it later at home, kind of thing. So use that technology. Explicit instructions are really important, usually for beginning and developing students. Maybe you have a sheet with the instructions laid out. First of all, you do this. Second, you do this. Third, you do this, to give them a fighting chance, because often they really just don't remember. They don't remember what they're supposed to do. And so this gives them a fighting chance. Scaffolding supports. Sometimes these beginning students also, they just need a little extra organization because their brain is like, woo, and they just can't organize themselves. So maybe you give them a graphic organizer. Maybe you give them some memory prompts. Maybe you give them a list. Okay, write this down. These are the 2 things that I want you to get done in the next 20 minutes. Boom, boom. Maybe you have a color-coded key for them, so that it's like, okay, this is ELA time, and you need to have a book and your pencil, kind of thing. And then outline the different components that are going to happen in the lesson that day, so that, again, they have a little bit of structure. Bring in songs and lots of movement. This will really help your beginning kids to remember, because when they kinesthetically are involved and they're musically involved, it helps the brain to use different pathways. And so bring lots of songs and movements in to help those beginning students. And place in class, actual physical placement in class. So does this beginning student, do they work better by themselves? Do they need to be like right beside you? Think about a physical help for them, like if they need one of those rolly balls, they need those little squishy toys. Think about that sort of that physical support for those beginning kids as well. Okay. Oh man, this is not pretty here. I thought that would go. Oh, I know why, because I'm not on full screen. Okay, so these are just, again, this is just some specific ways. I'm not going to read all these to you. I will leave those with you to just have a read through. It will help you when you're thinking specifically about ELA lesson plans. So if you know that a child has some reading difficulty, maybe you use less difficult or alternate reading material. Maybe you identify or define words prior to reading. So this gives some really, really specific ideas. So I would just have a go with this on your own and try to incorporate some of these things into your lesson plan. Okay. Again, this, the Alberta Education Differentiation document overview, pages 1 to 22, is worth just reading so you have an idea of the overall sense of the whole document. What we're going to do, we're going to share with colleagues ELA strategies for differentiation. You don't have to do anything ahead of time, but if you do look at page 195 to 212, it will really help you in creating differentiation for your lesson plan, for your assignment 3 lesson plan. So I would strongly advise you to have a look at this, because it just gives you some really specific ideas there and might just help make that section not so frustrating and not so confusing. Okay, to wrap up here, the reason why differentiation, why we will harp on this for the next couple of years with you, is because when I asked medicine hat teachers about, should we be teaching differentiation, this is what they say. I think the most important understanding is the huge need for differentiating multi-tiered approach to literacy. All classrooms have such a massive spread that the single approach will at most make your teachers fail and feel frustrated not knowing where to begin. For instance, my grade 2 class has a spread from pre-K skills to grade 7. How do I teach all of them? How do I ensure everyone's needs are met and not just teaching the math? My grade 5 class had a spread from grade 2 to grade 11. How do I ensure all cross-curricular information is being absorbed, and how do I ensure they're all being pushed? I also believe they need to know that there is not only one way to do things. No boxed program actually exists. That literacy takes a lot of time, intention, and endurance to make a difference so students can succeed. Awesome. Hopefully that gives you a little bit better sense of differentiation. Do have a look at those that imaginary classroom, those kids, because that will hopefully give you a chance to actually picture real life students and then take some of these concepts from our time together here and mash them together. All right, take care, everybody.